My name is Helen Whitaker. I'm 82 years old. I built my entire life from the ground up. Started a small catering service at 41 that grew into one of the largest food supply companies in the Midwest. For over 3 decades, I put everything I had into that business. My time, my hands, my tears. People used to call me the feeding matriarch of our town. But I never bragged. I never flaunted. I just worked. So when I got sick, when the coughing didn't stop and the weakness crept in like an unwanted guest, I did what I always do. I stayed silent. Told no one. Not even my son. Especially not his wife. That day, I was lying in the hospital bed after my 3rd chemotherapy session. My skin had grown pale, my hands were thin and veiny. I was too tired to fight, too tired to eat. But I was wide awake when the nurse wheeled in a flower arrangement and handed me a folded letter. I thought maybe it was a prayer card. It wasn't. It was a real estate brochure of a nursing home. And scribbled at the bottom, in my daughter-in-law's handwriting, were the words, "She won't need the house anymore. We'll list it next week. I've already got a buyer lined up." I nearly choked on my own breath. My hands trembled as I held the paper. They were selling my house, my home, while I was still alive, still fighting, still breathing. That was the moment I knew. I was right to hide the $10 million. But if you think that's the worst of it, if you think that's where it ends, wait until you hear what they did next. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Maybe then you'll understand why I kept the sale of my company a secret. Why I chose to stay quiet, even when it meant sitting at Sunday dinner while they laughed at my expired casserole, mocked my old sweaters, and handed me grocery coupons as birthday gifts. The signs were there all along. I just didn't want to see them. After my husband Raymond died 10 years ago, it was just me and my garden, me and my recipes. The house got quieter and lonelier, but I held on to the rhythm of my days. My son, Alan, would visit every other week, sometimes with his wife, Marla. She always came with her arms full. Wine bottles, store-bought pies, and that tone in her voice. You know the one. The one that says, "You poor thing." At first, I thought it was just her personality. Loud, busy, a little controlling. But over time the jokes got sharper. "You still using this flip phone? Don't tell me you still write checks. Why do you even keep this old place? You should downsize before you croak." She'd laugh, wave her hand like it was nothing. But I felt it in my bones. Alan. Well, Alan used to be soft-hearted. A bookish boy who cried when his dog died. But somewhere between marrying Marla and moving to the city, his spine stiffened and his eyes changed. He began treating me like a forgotten document, something to be filed away until needed. Then came the illness. I noticed it one morning while chopping onions. My hand cramped and dropped the knife. Later that week, I struggled to tie my shoelaces. Then came the coughing fits and the weight loss. The doctor confirmed it. Non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It wasn't the first time death had looked me in the eye. But this time I wasn't afraid. I was angry. Not at the cancer. Them. At Alan and Marla. For how they'd slowly turned me into a burden in their eyes. For how they didn't bother to ask if I needed help. For how they assumed the house, the garden, my life, would all be up for grabs once I was done. That same week I got an offer. An unsolicited one. From a major conglomerate interested in buying my company. I'd already handed day-to-day operations to my loyal manager, Diane. But the offer stunned me. $10 million. For my blood, sweat, and every pot of soup I ever stirred. I signed the deal. Quietly. Privately. I didn't even tell Diane where the funds went. I transferred the money to a private trust, structured under a different name. Hidden but legal. Protected. Untouchable. Told no one. And thank God I didn't. Because as my health worsened, Alan and Marla's visits got fewer, shorter, colder. One day, Marla walked into my bedroom uninvited, holding up my will like it was a grocery list. "You sure this is up to date, Mom? I mean, the market's hot right now. It'd be a shame if we didn't take care of things while you can still sign." That night, I changed the locks on my file cabinet. 2 weeks later, I collapsed in my kitchen and was rushed to the hospital. The doctors said I needed chemo immediately. I agreed. I didn't tell Alan. I didn't want to see the look of forced concern on his face. I didn't want pity from people waiting for me to fade out so they could cash in. But then came the betrayal that broke the last fragile piece of my heart. While I lay in that hospital bed, groggy from treatment, a social worker visited me. She said my family had concerns about my capacity, that they were petitioning for power of attorney, that they were worried I was making unsound financial decisions. I stared at her, stunned. They were trying to take over my life. Not because they cared, but because they wanted control of my home, my bank, my name. But they didn't know about the money. They didn't know I'd already moved everything. They didn't know I was 10 steps ahead. And just as I was about to confront them, something even darker came to light. You won't believe what I overheard the next time they visited the hospital room. Before we continue, take a moment. If this story is touching something deep inside you, if you've ever felt forgotten, underestimated, or quietly erased, this is your reminder. Your story still matters. Your voice has power no matter your age. Your dignity is not disposable. And sometimes, the quietest woman in the room holds the loudest truth. If this resonates with you, help us carry this message farther. Like this video so it reaches more people. Comment if you've ever had to fight for your worth. Subscribe because we tell stories for people who are finally being heard. Now, let's get back to Helen. She's not done yet. Not even close. The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beeping of machines and the low hum of the air conditioner above my bed. I had my eyes half closed, pretending to be asleep, as I often did during those long, lonely hours. The chemotherapy made me weak but not deaf. And thank God for that. Because that afternoon I heard them. Alan and Marla had come in like they owned the place. I could smell Marla's expensive perfume before I heard her voice. Sharp, smug as always. "She's out cold again," she said, dropping her purse on the windowsill. "I checked with the nurse, sedation for nausea, she won't wake up anytime soon." Alan sighed. "Good. We need to move fast." I spoke to Greg. He said the POA paperwork should be ready by Friday. Once we get that, we can list the house. My throat tightened. "Alan," Marla continued, "this is our shot. You've worked at that bank for 20 years. And what do we have to show for it? A 2-bedroom in a cramped neighborhood. We deserve better. Your mother's sitting on prime property. And God knows what else." "Yeah," Alan muttered. "That place is too big for her anyway. We'll probably get $500,000 for it, easy. Maybe more. Greg thinks we can even speed up a guardianship filing if she declines mentally." That's when it hit me. They weren't waiting for me to die. They were trying to push me out of my own life. One paper, one signature, one legal concern at a time. They were strategizing, plotting. I lay still as stone, fighting the tears that pressed at the corners of my eyes. Marla chuckled. "And if she has anything saved, we'll find it. She's old. She probably has checks stuffed in cookbooks or something. All we need is access." I couldn't listen anymore. My heart pounded. My hands trembled beneath the blanket. But I kept still, letting the sting of betrayal wash over me in waves. They left the room after 20 minutes. Marla forgot her sunglasses and came back briefly. She didn't notice the tear that slid down my cheek. I waited until the hallway was quiet, then called for the nurse. "Can you help me sit up?" I whispered. "Of course, Mrs. Whitaker," she said gently. When I was upright, I reached for the notepad by my bedside and wrote one name. Diane Palmer. My right-hand woman. The only person I'd ever trusted with my business. Diane had been with me since the early days, when we were working out of my garage, baking bread at 2 a.m. She knew loyalty. She knew hardship. And she knew I wasn't the kind of woman to fold. I dialed her number. "Helen," she answered, surprised. "Oh my God, I've been so worried." "Diane," I said, my voice hoarse. "I need you to come." And bring the binder. She understood instantly. I'm on my way. The binder she brought wasn't just full of numbers and tax documents. It held every proof of transfer from the company sale, the LLC name I'd placed the money under, the irrevocable trust details, and the sealed letter from my attorney explaining that I was of sound mind when it was signed. I wasn't just protecting my money. I was preparing for war. That evening, Alan returned alone. He smiled, fake and cautious. "How are you feeling, Mom?" he asked. I met his eyes. "Stronger than you think." His smile faltered. I didn't say a word about what I'd overheard. I needed more time. More leverage. If I revealed too much too soon, they'd change tactics. And worse, they might accelerate their plans. So I played weak. I let them believe I was fading. Over the next few days, Diane helped me draw up a new will, naming her as temporary executor until I recovered. I gave power of attorney, not to Alan, but to my lawyer, Mr. O'Malley. Everything was documented, witnessed, legal. But I still hadn't revealed the most critical piece. The $10 million sat untouched in a private account. And I had no intention of telling Alan or Marla a single thing. Yet they didn't stop. One night, I received a call from the local notary. Marla had requested a home visit, to have me sign off on some documents. She told them I had trouble keeping track of things lately. They were trying to corner me. But what they didn't know was that I had secretly requested hospital security footage from my room. Every conversation, every visit, every betrayal, captured in crystal clarity. I was building a case. And just when I thought I was ready to confront them, I got a shocking message from a neighbor back home. Apparently, Alan and Marla were already emptying out my house, room by room, painting the walls, calling contractors. They were planning to move in. I wasn't dead. I wasn't even home. But they were moving into my house. And what I found next, in one of the hidden drawers of my own bedroom, changed everything I thought I knew about Marla. Because hidden in that drawer wasn't just an old family photo album. It was a letter. A letter with my husband's name on it. And what it said. It made me question if Marla had planned this betrayal, for years. Stay with me. Because what's coming next? You won't believe it. And if you've ever doubted your gut, if you've ever kept quiet when your instincts screamed, this is your sign. Don't just watch from the sidelines. Like this story, if you believe every elder deserves respect. Drop a comment below. Have you ever trusted someone who turned out to be the enemy? Subscribe to this channel for stories that speak truth, power, and redemption. The fire inside Helen is just beginning to burn. I stared at the letter, my fingers trembling as I turned it over. The envelope was yellowed at the edges but sealed, with a neat cursive handwriting I hadn't seen in years. To Helen, only open if you feel alone, it read. My late husband Raymond had written it, long before he died of heart failure. It had been hidden beneath my old jewelry box, wrapped in a dish towel. I took a shaky breath and peeled it open. Inside I found not only a letter, but a warning. My dearest Helen, if you're reading this, then something's gone terribly wrong. I never wanted to bring this burden to your doorstep, but there's something you should know about Marla. I've seen things, heard things. Your son's wife is not who she claims to be. She married Alan for access. And I fear one day, when you're older and vulnerable, she'll try to take what you've built. Protect yourself. Protect your legacy. I trust you'll know what to do. With love always. A. My throat closed. The words blurred behind tears. I hadn't let myself cry in years. Raymond had seen it. He'd known. Long before I'd opened my eyes to it. And I had ignored every sign. Every sideways glance. Every sharp remark Marla made. Every financial suggestion Alan parroted from her lips. I'd excused it, softened it, because that's what mothers do. But now, I knew the truth. This wasn't just about a house. It was about everything I stood for, everything I had bled to build. I asked Diane to go to my home and photograph every change. What she found turned my stomach. All the family portraits were gone. My kitchen table had been moved to the garage. My bedroom was painted over in white and beige, like I had never lived there, like I didn't exist. They had scrubbed me out of my own home. Called the police. Technically, they told me, if they have a key and they're your next of kin, it's complicated. You'd need to file something formal. So I did. That day, I filed a cease and desist order. I also had my lawyer draft a revocation of Alan's inheritance. I transferred the house title into the name of my trust, effectively removing it from reach. Every legal step I took chipped away at the power they thought they had. But I didn't stop there. I wrote a letter of my own. I placed it in a manila envelope, addressed it to Alan and Marla, and had Diane deliver it directly to their new master suite. The next morning my phone rang. It was Alan. "You vindictive old woman," he hissed. "What the hell is this? You cut me off. After everything we've done for you." My voice didn't tremble. "You didn't do anything for me, Alan. You did it to me." There was silence. Then a click. I knew it wasn't over. That same evening I received a knock at the hospital door. It was Marla. In heels, full makeup, crocodile tears. She sat beside my bed, reached for my hand and said, "I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I was only trying to make things easier for you." I turned my head. "You were trying to erase me." She didn't expect me to say it. Her eyes narrowed just slightly before the fake concern returned. "I know you're tired," she said softly. "But you have to understand. This is all so hard on Alan. He doesn't sleep anymore. He just worries about you so much." My heart clenched, not with guilt, but with grief. Grief for the son I raised. The boy who used to tuck into my lap and ask if the moon ever got lonely. Where had he gone? Who had raised this man? Marla stood and pulled something from her purse. A small, silver recorder. "Just say a few words," she said with a soft smile. "Just tell Alan you're okay with us managing things until you feel better." I stared at it. She was trying to trap me. Use my voice against me. I didn't say a word. I simply pressed the nurse call button. When the nurse arrived, I pointed to Marla. "She's not allowed back. Ever." Marla's mask slipped. "You've always been dramatic. And you've always been a snake," I said. That night, Diane stayed late. We ordered soup and tea. I told her about Raymond's letter, and we cried together. "I'm so sorry, Helen," she said, holding my hand. "I'm not," I replied. "They showed me who they are. Now I know how to fight." The next day, the story took another brutal turn. Diane came in, her face pale. "Helen, I don't know how to say this. I just got off the phone with the bank. Someone tried to access the trust." "What?" "They impersonated you. They had fake ID and everything. Said they were transferring funds for medical care. They almost got through." My chest went ice cold. They had found out. Alan and Marla had discovered there was more. They didn't know the amount, but they knew enough to start digging. And if they kept digging, I had no doubt they'd find a way to crack things open, brick by brick. It was time to go public. Not on the news. In my own way. I drafted a letter to my extended family. Nieces, nephews, church friends, neighbors. A simple update. To those who know me. If you hear stories about my confusion or see changes to my home, please know. My health may be struggling, but my mind is clear. My decisions are my own and they are protected. If anything happens to me, my lawyer has instructions. With love and strength. Helen. Marla had tried to erase me. Now I was leaving a legacy instead. But just as I began to regain control, I received a certified envelope in the hospital mail. Inside, court papers. Alan and Marla were filing for full conservatorship over my estate, claiming I was mentally compromised and unable to manage my affairs. They were coming for everything. And the hearing was in 2 days. I had 48 hours to stop them. And I wasn't sure if I'd even be strong enough to stand in that courtroom. But I had something they didn't know I had. Secret witness. Someone who had been silently recording everything. And when you hear who it was, You'll understand why justice was already knocking at their door. Stay with me, because the storm is far from over. If this story is shaking something loose in your heart, let it. Like this video if you believe dignity should never be stolen. Comment your thoughts. What would you have done in Helen's shoes? Subscribe to the channel for more true-feeling stories that demand to be heard. We're heading into court in the next chapter. And you'll never guess who walks in last. The hospital room felt smaller than usual, suffocating almost. My chest rose and fell with shallow breaths as I held the court papers in my hands. My name was printed in bold, under the words petition for conservatorship, filed by my own son. I had less than 48 hours to prepare for the fight of my life, not against cancer, but against the people I once called family. I wasn't afraid of courtrooms. I'd stood before dozens of them in my time. Zoning approvals, health inspection hearings, even a few small business disputes. But this was personal. This was betrayal inked in legalese. This was my son asking the state to declare me incompetent, incapable, invisible. And the worst part, they thought I'd just roll over and let them win. But I wasn't alone. Diane had already mobilized Mr. O'Malley, my attorney. He moved like a bullet, filing emergency objections, requesting time-stamped video footage, gathering medical records from my oncologist and neurologist that confirmed in writing that I was mentally sharp. Still, the fear lingered. I was afraid of their lies. Afraid of how far Marla would go. Afraid that Alan would sit there and pretend he didn't know what she was doing, even as she sharpened her knives behind his back. But then, just as I was about to lose hope, a nurse named Keisha stepped into my room and shut the door behind her quietly. She looked nervous. Her fingers twisted the hem of her scrubs. "Mrs. Whitaker," she whispered, "I need to tell you something." I raised my eyebrows. "What is it?" She walked to my bedside and pulled a small flash drive from her pocket. I wasn't sure if I should say anything. I've been recording everything." My heart jumped. "What do you mean, everything?" Keisha looked ashamed. "Not for bad reasons. I'm in nursing school and we're trained to always document interactions for difficult patients or unusual situations. With your permission, I turned on the room audio when Marla and Alan started coming more often. I just had a gut feeling. Something felt wrong. She handed me the drive. "I have every word they said when they thought you were asleep." Tears flooded my eyes, this time not from pain, but from vindication. "You're a guardian angel," I whispered. "No, ma'am. I'm just tired of watching good people get hurt." I gave the flash drive to Mr. O'Malley that same hour. He reviewed it overnight, his face grim. "They're going to wish they never walked into that courtroom," he said. The morning of the hearing came faster than I expected. Diane wheeled me in wearing my best blue cardigan and the locket with Raymond's initials. My hair was wrapped in a silk scarf, and my face was pale but calm. I wasn't just showing up to defend myself. I was showing up to destroy a lie. Alan and Marla were already seated. He looked uncomfortable in his cheap gray suit. Marla, on the other hand, was poised. Hair in a tight bun, pearl earrings, crocodile tears already glistening at the corners of her eyes. The judge, a woman named Honorable Lydia Foster, reviewed the petition before looking up. "We're here to assess the mental and financial competence of Helen Whitaker, age 82, at the request of her son and daughter-in-law. Let's proceed." Marla stood. "Your Honor," she began, "we love Helen very much. But lately she's been confused. She forgets things. She talks about people who aren't in the room. She gave away thousands of dollars to a catering girl. We're just trying to keep her safe." I almost laughed. "Do you have medical proof?" the judge asked. "We have our observations," Marla said quickly. "And we've spoken to a friend at her bank." "That's not admissible," the judge cut in. "Do you have evidence?" Marla sat down. Mr. O'Malley rose calmly and plugged the flash drive into the court's monitor. "Your Honor," he said, "we have hours of audio of the petitioners discussing their plans to sell Ms. Whitaker's home, impersonate her financially, and seize control of her assets. while fully aware that she is undergoing cancer treatment and not mentally compromised. The courtroom went silent. Then the recording played. Marla's voice echoed through the chamber. "We'll just say she's confused. She can't prove otherwise. Once we get access, we can list the house. Alan, sign it already." Then Alan's voice. "Are you sure this isn't going to backfire? What if she has something we don't know about?" And Marla again. "She's dying. What's she going to do? Sue us from her deathbed?" The judge's eyes narrowed. Alan shifted in his seat, visibly sweating now. "I've heard enough," Judge Foster said. "Mrs. Whittaker, do you have anything you wish to say?" Diane wheeled me forward. I looked straight at Alan. "You were my only son. I raised you with love. I made your lunches, cheered at your graduations, stayed up late to sew patches on your scout uniform. I trusted you." He couldn't meet my eyes. "And you tried to bury me before I was even gone." The judge exhaled sharply and turned her attention back to her bench. "This is one of the most disturbing petitions I've seen in this courtroom. The audio is damning. The medical reports confirm that Mrs. Whittaker is of sound mind. The petition for conservatorship is denied. Additionally, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for further review of potential elder financial abuse." Marla's face went pale. Alan looked like someone had punched him in the gut. They had lost. Not just the case, but any sliver of decency they ever claimed to have. After the hearing, Diane and I went back to the hospital to rest, but the celebration was brief. Because that night someone broke into my house. They didn't take anything. They just smashed the picture frames, ripped the curtains, and left behind a single word, spray-painted on the kitchen wall in red. Which? They were angry. They were unhinged. And they weren't finished. But neither was I. Because I had one more secret. One more card they never saw coming. And in Chapter 5 you'll find out exactly how I turned that house, my house, into something they could never touch again. This isn't just a story of survival. It's a story of reclaiming power. If this chapter shocked you, tell me what part hit you hardest. Like this if you believe in second chances and quiet revenge. Subscribe now, because the storm may have passed, but the fire's still burning. The day after the court hearing, I returned to my house for the first time since everything blew open. I insisted Diane take me there, even though I was still weak. I needed to see it with my own eyes. To feel what they had done. The front door creaked as it opened. The scent that greeted me wasn't the usual warm blend of cinnamon and roses. It was cold, stale, angry. My living room had been gutted. The rug was rolled up and shoved in a corner. The photos of Raymond, our wedding, Alan as a baby, they were all gone. The walls were freshly painted, but sloppily done. My favorite blue chair, the one with the dent in the right armrest from years of reading, was missing. Diane helped me to the kitchen. That's when I saw it. The spray-painted word. Which? Red paint splashed across the cream-colored wall, jagged and violent. Beneath it, broken pieces of my teacup collection were scattered like glass confetti. My legs gave out. Diane caught me before I hit the floor. Wept. Not because of the vandalism but because I finally understood. There was no line they wouldn't cross. Not even defacing the home I had built with love and memory. They wanted to break me, scare me, humiliate me. But I was past fear. "Get me my keys," I said through gritted teeth. "And call the locksmith. Today." Diane didn't hesitate. Within an hour, every lock in the house was changed. Security system was installed. Cameras mounted. A nurse aide named Marta was arranged to live with me part-time. I was going to heal in my house, on my terms. But I didn't stop there. It was time to make the house untouchable. I called Mr. O'Malley and asked him to meet me at the title office. There, we finalized the paperwork to transfer the house from my personal name to the Helen Whittaker Foundation, an independent non-profit I'd quietly registered years ago, meant for helping single mothers and displaced seniors find employment through catering skills. Now the house had a new owner. Me, but also not me. Legally, Alan and Marla couldn't touch it. Even if I passed tomorrow, the house was locked away from their greedy fingers. It would become a training center, a safe place for people like me. For the forgotten, the overlooked, the survivors. That night, as I sat in my favorite recliner, yes, we found it stashed in the garage, covered in a tarp, I opened a letter from the district attorney's office. They were officially opening an investigation into Alan and Marla for attempted financial exploitation and fraudulent impersonation. But let the law do its work. But even with all that, the hardest part remained. The silence from Alan. No apology. No remorse. Not even a text. I suppose part of me still hoped the boy I raised might break through the man he'd become. That he'd see what he'd done. That he'd come back, even if broken, and say, "I'm sorry, Mom." But he didn't. Instead, Marla did. She showed up at my front gate the next afternoon, red-faced, crying, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she sobbed through the intercom. "Please, please, Helen. We're losing everything. The bank froze our accounts. We're under investigation. Alan lost his job. Just talk to me. Please." I didn't respond. I watched from my living room window as she cried into her hands. Then I saw it. She wasn't crying for me. She was crying for herself. For the fallout. For the fact that her mask had finally cracked. She turned and walked away when it became clear I wasn't coming out. That night, I finally found peace enough to sleep. But it was short-lived. At 3:14 a.m., the security alarm blared. Diane and Marta ran to my room. Someone had thrown a brick through the back kitchen window. The police came immediately. They reviewed the footage. And there, clear as daylight, was Alan, hooded, gloved, fleeing into the night after smashing the glass. My son. Trying to break into the house he once played in with toy trucks. Trying to shatter what he couldn't steal. I filed a restraining order the next morning. And I called the DA to ensure they had that footage too. I was done protecting him. The next day, while sitting on the porch with Diane, I got a message from a woman I hadn't seen in over 30 years. Her name was Bethany Coleman. She used to be my assistant when I first started the catering company. She left to raise her family and start her own bakery down south. In the message, she said, "Helen, I just saw what happened to you in the news. You always believed in me when no one else would. If you ever need anything, I'm here." And that gave me an idea. I didn't just want to hide what was left of my strength. I wanted to use it. I wanted to create something lasting. Something louder than what they tried to erase. So I called Bethany. And together, we began building the blueprint for the Helen Whitaker training home. Right inside the house Alan and Marla tried to steal. I would host young women and older women alike. Teach them business, cooking, self-worth, legal literacy, legacy. My story would become their protection. And my silence would become a megaphone. But just as we laid the first bricks of that dream, I received a letter from the courthouse. Alan had filed an appeal. He was trying again. He claimed new evidence showed I was mentally unstable and under manipulation. He was naming Diane in the claim too, saying she had coerced me to rewrite my will. And the hearing was set for the following Monday. If they succeeded, they could dismantle everything. The house, the non-profit, my freedom. And I still didn't know what new evidence they were talking about. They had found something. Or planted something. Either way, one thing was clear. They weren't done. And neither was I. Because in the next chapter, I fight for the dream they tried to bury. Tell me, have you ever had to start over after betrayal? Like this, if you believe dignity cannot be stolen, it must be surrendered, and Helen is not surrendering. Subscribe to follow Helen's comeback. Her fire's just beginning to roar. The courthouse was colder than before. Or maybe it was me. Maybe my nerves were raw from everything. My body weakened from chemo, my soul shaken from betrayal, my hope stretched thin like a thread on fire. But I didn't shake. Not today. Diane wheeled me into the courtroom, calm as ever. She wore her silver pin, Raymond's old initials, clipped to her blazer like a quiet form of battle armor. I hadn't slept the night before, not with the word appeal echoing in my skull. Alan was back. And this time he wasn't alone. He had a new lawyer. Younger. Slicker. A woman who smiled without her eyes. She carried a thick binder into the courtroom like she'd come to a knife fight with a bazooka. And behind her, Alan. Tired, sunken, his suit a little wrinkled. But his stare was different this time. There was no guilt left. Only rage. The judge, a new one, Judge Terence Walker, adjusted his glasses and addressed the room. We're here to review the petition of Alan Whitaker, who is appealing the court's prior ruling denying conservatorship over his mother, Helen Whitaker, citing new evidence of manipulation and mental incompetency. I tightened my grip on the arms of my chair. Mr. O'Malley leaned over and whispered, "Let them speak first. We have the hammer this time." Marla wasn't present. That should have eased me, but it didn't. The lawyer stood. "Your Honor," she said smoothly, "we believe that Mrs. Whitaker's recent decisions have not only endangered her estate but have also been heavily influenced by a former employee, Ms. Diane Palmer, who stands to benefit financially from her current living arrangement and revised will." I nearly choked. She continued, "We have here copies of text messages, retrieved from an old device Helen gifted to her house staff, that suggest Diane had plans to take over the property under the guise of a charitable foundation. We also have a new psychological assessment, signed by Dr. Russell Stein, a neurologist from Phoenix, suggesting possible early-stage dementia based solely on reported behaviors." I looked at Mr. O'Malley, stunned. "What messages?" I whispered. He frowned. "They fabricated something. We'll tear it down." The judge asked, "Are these assessments independent?" The lawyer nodded. "They were submitted anonymously, but the source appears credible. We request an immediate freeze on Helen Whitaker's assets and a temporary suspension of her foundation activities until this is resolved." My breath caught in my throat. They wanted to freeze everything. Take back what they'd lost. Paralyze me. Mr. O'Malley rose slowly. "Your Honor, may I?" He approached the bench with a calm I could never master. "We would like to submit a formal rebuttal. First, we have sworn testimony from Dr. Valerie Koenig, Helen's treating physician, who affirms Helen is of sound mental capacity." He passed the document to the judge. "Second, we have a forensics report from a tech specialist who examined the messages allegedly pulled from Helen's old phone. The findings confirm the device had been tampered with. The messages were planted, created and backdated using a third-party app and inserted using a cloned SIM card." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Mr. O'Malley continued, "We also have a live witness, an IT technician hired by Mr. Whitaker last month. He'll testify that he was paid to clone Helen's phone under the guise of tech recovery." The judge blinked. "You're saying the petitioner faked evidence?" "We're not saying it, Your Honor. We're proving it." Then the bomb dropped. Mr. O'Malley wheeled out a cart with a flat-screen monitor. "Finally," he said, "we have surveillance footage from the security system Helen installed, just days before the break-in at her home." The footage played. Alan, masked and hooded, smashing her kitchen window, then fleeing into the night. The room went silent. No one spoke. Even Alan dropped his gaze. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Whitaker, did you or did you not attempt to gain unauthorized access to your mother's property following the denial of your original petition?" Alan didn't respond. The judge pressed again. "Do you deny submitting fabricated evidence to this court?" Still silence. The judge sighed and looked to the bailiff. "Please escort Mr. Whitaker from the courtroom. His petition is not only denied, it's being referred for criminal investigation." Alan stood. He looked at me, but not with apology, with something worse. A pure festering hate. As the bailiff guided him out, he muttered under his breath, "You chose strangers over your own blood." I stared back, voice low but steady. "No, chose respect. And you bled it dry." The courtroom cleared slowly. People whispered. Papers shuffled. But all I heard was the thump of my own heart. Steady, finally steady. Outside, the sun hit my face. Felt warm again. Diane pushed my chair toward the car. It's over, Helen. I shook my head. No, it's just beginning. That night, I returned home to find an envelope on the porch. There was no address, no stamp. Just one name written in thick black marker. From Marla. Inside were 2 photos and a single note. The first photo was of Alan. The second was of a baby. The note said, "You think you know everything but you don't. Ask Alan about 1995. Ask him who that baby really belonged to. You think I'm the monster. I was protecting you from a truth you refused to see." My hands trembled as I clutched the photo of the child. Chubby cheeks, dark curls, eyes so familiar it made my stomach twist. That was the year Alan had a breakdown. The year Raymond suddenly stopped speaking to him for months. The year I found blood in the guest room sheets and no one would explain why. I had buried that memory. And now, it had clawed its way back. The story I thought was over had just reopened a door to a secret I never saw coming. In the next chapter, we go back to 1995. And what I find there will shake everything I thought I knew about my family. If this story is taking your breath, let it. Like this, if you believe truth always rises, no matter how long it's buried. Tell me, have you ever uncovered a family secret too heavy to hold? Subscribe to hear the rest. We're not done. Not even close. 1995. I had avoided that year for decades. Locked it away like a haunted attic room. Too heavy to enter, too dark to understand. But Marla's note had shattered the door wide open. And that photograph, that child's face. It was a mirror. Not of me. Not of Raymond. But of Alan. Yet something in the child's eyes, something far softer, more fragile, didn't match the boy I'd raised. I sat on my porch that night, the photos trembling in my lap, wondering what kind of lie had been growing under my nose all these years. Diane sat beside me, watching quietly. "I don't want to dig up ghosts," I said finally, "but I think this one's been walking beside me the whole time." She gave my hand a gentle squeeze. "Let's find the truth. Whatever it is, you deserve to know." So the next morning we began. First stop, my old photo albums. I had one for every year since Alan was born. But strangely, there were gaps in 1995. Missing pages. Whole weeks without a single memory. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was still running the business, working 16-hour days, and Raymond. He'd taken over more of the household things by then. But now, with clear eyes, I saw what I hadn't before. There were no birthday photos of Alan that year. No Christmas pictures. No family portraits. Just emptiness. And I remembered something else. That was the year I came home early from a conference in Cincinnati and found Raymond and Alan in the garage. Both looked like they'd seen a ghost. Alan had bruises on his neck, and Raymond's hand was bleeding. Raymond said it was a disagreement about money. I believed him. I was a fool. I needed answers. So I did something I swore I never would. I called Alan's old high school girlfriend, Linda. It had been over 30 years, but I found her through a mutual contact at church. She agreed to meet at a cafe downtown. When she saw me, her eyes widened, not in surprise but something like guilt. "I wondered when you'd come," she whispered, stirring her tea. "What happened in 1995, Linda?" I asked, no preamble. "And who was the child in that photo?" She swallowed hard. "That baby's name is Cassidy," she said. "She's my daughter." I stared. "Yours and Alan's." She shook her head. "No, not mine. And not yours either." I blinked. "What do you mean?" Linda hesitated, then looked me square in the face. "Alan assaulted my cousin. She was 16. She was staying with me for the summer. Her name was Erica. She got pregnant. My aunt sent her away in shame, and Alan's father, Raymond, paid them off to keep it quiet. You were never told. Raymond told them it would destroy you." My stomach lurched. "No," I whispered. "No, that can't be." "He made Erica sign away parental rights. Put Cassidy in foster care. He thought it was cleaner that way." She begged to keep her baby, but she was too young, too scared, and your husband? He was persuasive. Erica overdosed 3 years later. The cafe around us buzzed with noise, but I heard none of it. I was underwater, drowning. Alana had fathered a child by force. And Raymond, my Raymond, had hidden it from me. Had covered it up like a mess in the corner of a holy house. I couldn't breathe. She's alive, Linda added quickly. Cassidy. She's 28 now. She lives in Denver. Teaches 2nd grade. She doesn't know anything about the past. Just that she was adopted young. My hands were shaking so hard I couldn't hold the teacup. How do I even face this? I murmured. How do I carry this? Linda reached across the table. With grace, Helen. The same way you always have. And maybe you let her decide what to do with the truth. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room, clutching the photo of Cassidy, weeping into the silence of a house that once held so many secrets. I mourned Raymond. I mourned the son I thought I knew. And most of all, I mourned the girl whose life was ruined so mine could remain comfortable. I had to make it right. The next day I wrote a letter. Took hours. Every word a stitch in a wound I didn't know I had. Dear Cassidy, my name is Helen Whitaker. I believe we may be connected through your biological family. I know this letter may come as a shock, and I ask only for your grace as you read it. I have no desire to disrupt your life, only to offer the truth I was denied for too long. If you are open to a conversation, I would be honored to speak with you. With warmth and respect. Helen. Mailed it. Certified. No return address. Only my lawyer's contact. Then I waited. 2 weeks passed. No word. 3. Then, one Friday morning, Diane opened the front door to find a young woman standing there. Slim. Curly brown hair. Warm brown eyes. She clutched the letter to her chest. Hi, she said, voice trembling. I'm Cassidy. I couldn't move. She walked slowly toward me. I got your letter. I didn't know what to think. But I had to come. I had to know who you are. Tears streamed down my cheeks. I'm no one special, I choked out. I'm just someone who should have known. Who should have protected you and your mother. She sat beside me. I don't hate you, she said softly. I don't even hate him. I just wanted to understand where I came from. I took her hand. And for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than rage and grief. Felt hope. We talked for hours. She asked about Raymond. I told her the truth. She asked about Alan and I gave her what I could. And then she said something I didn't expect. I'd like to help at your foundation. I think maybe this is where I'm supposed to be. She smiled. And I saw something in her that I hadn't seen in so long. Legacy. Not built from blood but from truth. But just as I began to let the healing in, the news came crashing down again. A warrant had been issued. Not for Alan. For me. Someone had reported me to the IRS for fraudulent asset concealment during the sale of my company. An anonymous tip. And all roads pointed to the same name. Marla. She was back. And she was ready to burn everything down. In the next chapter, they come for my money. But this time I don't stand alone. If this chapter left you speechless, you're not alone. Like this, if you believe the truth, no matter how painful, is still worth knowing. Subscribe. We've got 2 chapters left. And justice is almost here. The letter from the IRS arrived in a cold white envelope. Unmarked. No warning. Just a crisp government seal and a typed accusation that made my hands go numb. This letter is to inform you that a preliminary investigation has been launched into your recent asset restructuring and tax filings, as related to the sale of Whitaker Provisions LLC. Failure to provide requested documentation within 15 days may result in formal charges, audits, or property seizure. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at those words, feeling the breath drain from my chest. Not because I'd done anything illegal, but because I knew exactly who had triggered this storm. Marla. She'd lost the court battle. Lost Alan to his own destruction. lost access to my estate. But she hadn't lost her hunger. She'd found a new way to come for me, through bureaucracy. Through systems designed to chew people like me up and spit us out before they even understood what was happening. And I knew how these things worked. Even if I was innocent, the process could ruin me. I called Mr. O'Malley immediately. "I need everything," I said. "Every scrap of paper. Every record from the sale. Every tax filing. Every trust document." He didn't hesitate. "We'll have it all. But Helen, you should prepare yourself. If she has ties inside the system, this might not be about what's legal. It might be about what looks suspicious." 15 days. That's all I had to prove. I wasn't hiding $10 million for nefarious reasons. I wasn't. But truth doesn't always matter to a machine that feeds on paper trails and fear. Still, I wasn't alone. Diane sat with me night after night, sorting through boxes, matching dates, scanning receipts. Marta made warm tea and kept me grounded. And Cassidy, sweet, quiet Cassidy, turned out to have an accountant friend in Denver who specialized in nonprofit finances. She offered to help. "It's the least I can do," she said. "If this foundation matters to you, it matters to me." Together we built a binder thicker than a phone book. I even tracked down the man who brokered the sale of my company, now retired in Florida. He sent me a notarized affidavit confirming the trust was created before the sale and that I had declared all taxes up front. I had nothing to hide. But the fear still crawled under my skin. Because I'd seen this happen before, to good people, to immigrants, to elderly women, to widows. Bureaucracy doesn't bleed, and it doesn't apologize. Then came the phone call. It was a robotic voice first, standard protocol. Then a click. Then a man. "This is Agent Kerr from the Internal Revenue Service. I'm calling to schedule an in-person review of your financial documentation." "When?" "Yes. Tomorrow morning. At your residence. 9 a.m. Barely slept. At 8:45 a.m., the black sedan pulled up. 2 men in suits stepped out. They looked around, taking in the cameras, the trimmed hedges, the birdhouse I'd painted last fall. Inside, Cassidy set down a tray of tea and folders. Diane was dressed in a crisp blazer. I sat upright in my wheelchair, wearing Raymond's favorite shawl and my grandmother's silver watch. I wasn't going to look like a woman in hiding. I was going to look like a woman ready. Agent Kerr was polite but unreadable. His partner, a younger man, said little. They reviewed every page, flipping, highlighting, asking questions that made my stomach twist even when I had nothing to hide. "Why is the trust registered in a different name? Why did you choose an out-of-state trustee? What prompted the sale when your health began to decline?" Each time I answered calmly. "Because I planned for my legacy. Because I didn't trust my son. Because I'd rather die broke than fund the people who tried to bury me alive." After 3 hours they stood. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker. We will contact you once we've reviewed everything." "Will I be charged with anything?" "Yes." Agent Kerr finally looked up. "There's nothing that warrants a charge at this time." This time. They left. And I exhaled for the first time in days. But the storm wasn't over. Because that night, Cassidy came into the living room holding her phone, her hands trembling. "She posted something," she said. "Who?" "Marla." She handed me the phone. On Facebook, on a public post, was a photo of me, taken through the window without my knowledge. The caption read, "This is Helen Whitaker. She sold her company for $10 million, faked dementia to hide it, and cut off her own son. Now she's parading around with her illegitimate granddaughter, and pretending she's a saint. Funny how money changes people. Hashtag justice for Alan, hashtag elder abuse can go both ways." It went viral. Overnight, thousands of people, strangers, were flooding the post with comments. Some supported me, but others didn't. They called me greedy, manipulative, a witch, liar, monster. They sent messages. "I hope you die poor. Rot in that old house. You ruined your son. I sat there, shaking, watching my life being picked apart by people who didn't know me, didn't care to. Marla had changed tactics again. Now it was public shaming, reputation assassination, and people were eating it up. Cassidy looked crushed. I shouldn't have come here. This is my fault. No, I said. This is not your fault. This is hers. And if she wants a war, I'll give her one. I called a contact I hadn't spoken to in years. Stephanie Rogers, a retired investigative journalist who once covered my company's rise. She'd always respected me. I hope she still did. I explained everything. She didn't hesitate. We'll get the real story out, she said. You just need to trust me. 2 days later, Stephanie published a long-form article titled, "The Woman They Tried to Erase. The True Story of Helen Whitaker." It covered everything. Marla's attempts to take over my home, Alan's court hearing, the forged evidence, the IRS investigation, and the baby girl from 1995 who became the very legacy I chose to protect. The article went viral, too. But this time, in a different way. People started commenting. She's a hero. I want to be this woman when I'm old. Marla should be in jail. Tides turned. I received flowers, letters. Even a group of young women from the local college showed up one day with cookies and signs that read, "We love you, Grandma Helen." For the first time in a long time. Felt powerful. Not rich. Not feared. Just heard. But just as I settled into that warmth, Diane came rushing into the room. "Turn on the TV," she said, breathless. "Now." We switched to the local news. The anchor's voice was calm, but her eyes were serious. Breaking news tonight in the Whitaker investigation. Marla Jennings, former daughter-in-law of Helen Whitaker, has been arrested and charged with obstruction of justice, identity fraud, and falsification of federal documents in an attempt to frame her former mother-in-law. Froze. They were showing Marla in handcuffs. She was screaming my name. "Helen set me up. She's the witch." And as the camera zoomed out behind her, was Alan, standing on the curb, not trying to help her, just watching, expressionless. In the next chapter, I confront the man I gave birth to. And nothing will ever be the same after that. If this chapter gave you chills, you're not alone. Tell me, what would you say if your own child became your enemy? Like this, if you believe justice, no matter how delayed, always finds its way. Subscribe. The final chapters are coming. And Helen still has one thing left to say. It had been 2 weeks since Marla's arrest. Her face haunted every news broadcast, every article, every whisper in the grocery store. Some called her a mastermind, others a criminal. But to me, she was something far simpler, a symptom. The disease was deeper. The disease was Alan. I hadn't heard from him since the footage of Marla's arrest aired. But I hadn't stopped thinking about him. About the son I raised. The boy who used to hide under the porch during thunderstorms, whispering that the thunder sounded like God bowling. The boy who once said he'd never let me grow old alone. Now he was a ghost. A hollow man watching silently while his wife tried to destroy everything I'd built. But I wasn't going to wait anymore. If he wouldn't come to me, I would go to him. Diane and Cassidy tried to talk me out of it. "What do you expect him to say?" Diane asked gently. "I don't know," I whispered. "But I need to see him. One last time. For me." So on a quiet Tuesday morning, I got dressed in my navy wool coat and the same boots I wore to his wedding. We drove to the edge of town where Alan and Marla's house stood, still and silent like a crime scene. The front yard was dead grass and sun-bleached toys that hadn't seen a child's hand in years. I rang the bell. He answered. Alan looked older, thinner. His eyes had deep shadows and his beard was scruffy. He didn't say anything at first, just stared. "Hi," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He looked behind me like he was expecting police backup, then stepped aside. I walked in. The house smelled like stale beer and burnt food. Dishes were piled in the sink. The couch had a rip in the cushion. This wasn't the home I remembered them building. "I just came to talk," I said. He sat down without a word. I don't want to fight, Alan. I want to understand. How we got here. How you got here. His jaw tightened. He still wouldn't look at me. I raised you to be kind. Until. I didn't raise you to hurt people. You raised me to be nothing, he snapped, finally turning toward me. You raised me to be in your shadow. You always loved that business more than me. Dad more than me. Even Diane more than me. I felt the sting like a slap. That's not true. You think I didn't see it, he said, voice rising. You were never proud of me. You just tolerated me. When I started at the bank, you barely blinked. When Marla and I lost the baby, you sent flowers like it was an office party. I felt my knees wobble and sat down slowly. You lost a baby. He froze. You didn't know. No, I whispered. No, Alan. I didn't. He leaned back, breathing hard. We had a miscarriage. 7 years ago. Marla never told you. She said, what's the point? You just send a card. I didn't know what to say. All this time, I'd thought the distance came from greed. From Marla's influence. But under it there was pain. Bitterness. A child who never said what hurt until it became hate. I'm sorry, I said finally. I'm sorry if I made you feel invisible. That was never my intent. He stared at the wall. You gave away everything, he muttered. The house. The money. To strangers. To people who cared for me. Who protected me when you didn't. Silence. I pulled a small envelope from my coat pocket and placed it on the coffee table. I didn't come here to scold you. Or to beg. I came here because no matter what you did. I still remember the little boy who used to fall asleep with his hand in mine. He looked at the envelope. What's this? A letter, I said. Not a will. Not a check. Just my words. For you to read when you're ready. I stood up, but before I turned to leave, I said one last thing. You don't have to be like her, Alan. You still get to choose the man you want to be. Even now. He didn't reply. I walked out of that house knowing that I had let go. Not of love. But of expectation. I couldn't carry both anymore. Back home, Diane had news. They're dropping the IRS investigation, she said with a wide grin. Said the documentation was ironclad. And this is the big one. Marla's facing charges in both state and federal court. I exhaled deeply, finally, feeling the weight lift off my lungs. Cassidy hugged me that night. I don't know how you're still standing, she whispered. Because, I said, I've spent my life surviving. Well, I'm ready to live. We celebrated the grand opening of the Helen Whitaker training home the next weekend. The whole town came out. People brought flowers, food, music. There were speeches, tears, laughter. I stood in front of the crowd with Cassidy and Diane beside me and felt something I hadn't felt in years. But just as I began to believe the story had reached its ending, life surprised me one last time. A letter arrived in the mail. The handwriting was careful, slanted. The envelope plain. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Dear Helen, I read your article. I watched the interviews. And I think it's time I told you something I've kept secret for a long, long time. I'm not just Cassidy's adoptive aunt. I'm her biological grandmother. And what really happened to her mother, Erica, is not what you think. Please call me. I have something you need to see. There was a phone number. And a name I never expected. Raymond's sister. She'd been silent for 30 years. And now she was ready to speak. In the next chapter that we learn the real reason Raymond covered everything up. And the truth will leave Helen facing the one choice she never saw coming. If you're speechless, tell me, what would you do if everything you believed was built on a deeper secret? Like this if you believe healing sometimes comes right before the last storm. Subscribe. The final chapter is next. And it will change everything. The final chapter began not with shouting or courtrooms, but with a phone call. I waited until twilight before dialing the number written in the letter. My hand trembled slightly as the line rang. Once. Then a soft, aged voice answered. Helen. Yes. This is Helen Whitaker. The silence that followed was thick with decades of withheld truth. "This is Nora," she said at last. "Raymond's sister. I wasn't sure you'd call. I need to know what really happened," I replied. "No more secrets." She agreed to meet the next morning. Cassidy drove me to the nursing home where Nora now lived. The place smelled of lemon polish and thyme. Nora met us in the visitor room, thinner than I remembered, her hair silver like ash, eyes heavy with the weight of memory. She looked at Cassidy. "She looks just like Erica," she whispered. "Same eyes. Same softness." Cassidy stayed behind with the nurse while Nora and I sat in the corner, knees touching. "You think Raymond paid Erica's family to disappear," Nora began. "And he did. But it wasn't to cover Alan's crime." I blinked. "What are you saying?" She took a deep breath. "Raymond wasn't hiding Alan's sin. He was hiding his own." My stomach twisted. "What?" Nora's voice broke. "Raymond was Cassidy's father, Helen. Not Alan." The world spun sideways. I clutched the armrest of my chair. "No," I whispered. "No, that's not possible. He would never." "He did," she said. "Erica was 16. She worked in the church Raymond volunteered at, filed choir sheets, organized the offering. He took advantage of her trust, her quietness. When she got pregnant, she was terrified. She confided in me. I begged her to go to the police, but she refused. Said it would destroy you. And Raymond. He promised he'd take care of it. And he did. Just not the way he should have." My breath came out in shallow gasps. "He told me if I ever said anything, he'd cut me off. Shamey. He said you'd never believe it." I let fear win. I couldn't speak. Couldn't blink. The man I loved, the man I grieved, was not who I thought he was. I had spent decades mourning a lie. I looked at Cassidy through the window. She was smiling at the nurse's baby, her fingers curled in delight. She had no idea. And I had no idea how to tell her. Back home, Diane found me in the garden, sitting in Raymond's old rocking chair, tears falling freely into my lap. "You found something," she said. "I found everything," I replied. "And now I don't know what to do with it." I told her the truth. All of it. She held my hand and said the one thing I needed most. "You don't have to carry his sins." That night, I wrote a second letter to Cassidy. But I didn't give it to her right away. Instead, I spent the next 2 weeks watching her teach baking to 4 single mothers in our training center. I watched her laugh, organize, listen. I watched her become everything that Raymond never was. And finally, I handed her the envelope. "I'm giving you this not because I expect anything from you," I said, "but because I owe you the truth. Not the truth I was given, but the truth I found." She read it alone. When she returned, her eyes were red, her lips trembling. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," I replied. "Just know that none of this, none of what happened, defines who you are. You are light, Cassidy. And your mother would be proud." She hugged me then tightly. And didn't let go. In the following months, the Helen Whitaker Training Home became a local sanctuary. Women from across the county applied to join our programs. Young mothers. Seniors discarded by their children. Women rebuilding from bruises both seen and unseen. And I told my story. Publicly. On a local TV segment. I sat across from the reporter and said, "The truth is, I hid the sale of my company because I had already seen the greed in my family's eyes. But what I didn't see, what I didn't want to see, was the darkness that had been buried for decades in the people I trusted most. I tell my story not for pity, but for every woman who has been silenced, betrayed, buried, because we are never too old to rise again. And our dignity is never up for sale." Alan never reached out again. I heard he moved away. Changed his last name. Maybe in time he'll heal. Maybe not. But I made peace with never knowing. Marla was convicted on multiple charges. Served 18 months. When she got out, she sent me a one-line letter. "You were right to hide it." I burned it. But not out of hate. Out of release. Cassidy eventually became co-director of the foundation. She changed her last name to Whitaker, not for me, but for her. She said it was her way of reclaiming a name tainted by pain and giving it a new purpose. I couldn't be prouder. Now, every morning I sit on the front porch, sipping tea while the trainees cook in the kitchen. Hear laughter. Music. Oh. I still wear Raymond's old shawl. But not because I miss him. Because I reclaimed me from the shadows he left behind. And as the sun rises, I whisper the same thing every morning. I survived. And that is enough. If this story moved you, tell me. What would you do if your greatest heartbreak became your greatest purpose? Like this if you believe strength has no age limit. Subscribe because somewhere out there, another Helen needs to hear this. You are not done. You are just beginning.